Hello, my friends. Thank you for coming to play with the ideas that I present on my channel. Today, I want to share with you the meditation that I did with Buckminster Fuller. Buckminster Fuller was one of the great geniuses of all times, and there will be some links to information about him in the descriptor box below. I particularly wanted to connect with Bucky because at the time I was living in a geodesic dome, which was one of his inventions. Today, though, Bucky and I spoke of many different things, but this podcast will be on genius and the way he experienced genius in his life. But first, I want to say that genius, the Latin derivation of that word, means spirit present at birth. So, one of the questions that I asked Bucky was, how did he do his work? Bucky said he tapped into all of human mind. That in essence, he became human mind while he was here in physical. He had access to the whole human pool of all knowledge, past, present, and future. But he was also limited somewhat by his physical body and also by the span of years or the time in life that he was here. And both limited him somewhat. Being in time and space in a body, he could only transfer so much information into physical. But he had access to all knowledge that is available to our species. And so he brought in things that would be discovered far into the future. Many will forget, even if the documentation still exists, that he saw them when he was here, that he saw that he tapped into that. What Bucky said was that he could have been called a psychic because he could do time travel in his mental vehicle. Although when he was in a body, he didn't quite see it that way. He saw these ideas as coming to him instead of him going to the ideas and bringing them back. It all happened at a lightning speed for him. And he knew that everyone that was human could tap into what he did. So we all are potentially at the same level. He had a very high regard for anyone's mind, particularly children's mind, because children had it easier to tap into this information pool. They didn't have so many other things excluding their genius. But every human being had the potential to be a genius. It's just a choice they did or did not make to tap into this material or information that's available to all of us in the human species consciousness pool. And I said, well, Bucky, how did you tap into this knowledge pool? And he said, he had to make himself very empty on every level, empty physically, empty emotionally, empty mentally, and he had to stay empty for a long time. But it was in this void that he found all knowledge, and that the completeness of his emptiness and the length of time that he spent in a non-thinking mode was probably years and years, while he matched himself to a much larger frame of reference. He chuckles. He said, if you give attention to something for a short time with very little energy, you will only reap a small amount of what's available to you. And so the completeness and length of time in which I attuned myself to this possible access to all of human intelligence was very important It's very important for me to convey that what I finally encompassed with my entire mind was all potential intelligence of the human species. And in that sense, he said he was different from Edgar Cayce, who was perhaps tapping into a different type of intelligence source, or the people who are tapping extraterrestrial intelligence sources here on the planet right now, or you yourself, who are tapping the concurrently existing figureheads and leaders or individual personalities from different energy types. He said, but I was very much concerned with the human mind and the human mind's energy pool. And this is available to anyone who wants to make the extreme effort that it takes, not just to tap into this, but to envelop it with their mind. So I asked Bucky, what kind of choices did you make before you were born? He said he was very much aware of his choice between the ages of 1 and 4, and that's why he didn't speak, because he was very busy tuning his mind to keep access to this pool of human knowledge. He was very afraid of losing his grasp on this great gift of the connection to all of human mental capacity. He was afraid that if he distracted himself mentally from that, he wouldn't be able to retain the bond. And he said it was necessary for him to keep that mental link when he was very young in order to solidify it into his physical vehicle. But I said, Bucky, before you were born, who were you? Where were you? He said, like a lot of us, I was potential. I was potential energy, potential identity. He said that was his one life. And that was his one time in physical, and he will never come into physical again. Although I was near countless generations of humans, assisting and helping with their own genius. Many of the geniuses, the God-fearing geniuses in many different cultures, but they weren't me. I was only that man that you identify as Buckminster Fuller. He spent a lot of time outside of physical, preparing his potential before he was born. He didn't want to have a lot of encumbrances on him in his physical life. And through careful preparation to not have especially emotionalism as an encumbrance to his life work. He said, in your terms, he completed his God-given intent through the expression of that one lifetime. He continues that he will continue to contribute to our mental species pool, which he says is a level and layer that's really not far above the earth, because indeed our species consciousness is both higher and lower than we are. And by lower, he means the very negative consciousness being shared by our species. But there is extremely elevated consciousness also to be sought after and tapped into. And if most people practiced and knew how to access these high information levels, the information is accessible to anyone who would make the effort to reach it. He said that the studying of books of what other people write is the metaphor in physical for seeking this knowledge pool. which, although it is very close to physical, it is not accessible from physical, but it is accessible with the mind. And then I asked him about his discoveries that would be uh, finally enter into our human history here. He answered, that's what it's meant by geniuses being ahead of their time. What they're doing is going ahead of the time that they are in while they are in physical, gleaning knowledge from future species consciousness pool. Everything that could be developed, evolved, or eventually known by the species before the species itself, even as an energy form, entered the stream to express in universe, was formed in God. And many geniuses understand that they are accessing their information through time travel. People can place themselves in certain mental attitudes, and then these ideas come to them. But what they're actually doing is slipping the bonds of their own time period and accessing information that in the future will be in physical. That's why so many inventions, so many things that are brought in are completely forgotten. They're not seen by people because the culture on the whole is not ready to assimilate these concepts into physical. And even if they are documented, they're not put to use because in the culture, it's just not time for that information to exist. And then I asked, well, then, is the course of this species preordained? Because if this future history is accessible, and he said, in a general way, yes, the plan was formed before the species energy left God. Before that, the potential for the species plan and its completion was formed in God. That left God to go into expression, or what we would think of as manifestation. And that plan would have to be executed along certain general lines in order to complete its intent. And then ultimately become God once more. And so along very general lines, the evolution, which is a very misunderstood word, of the species is set forth in a plan from God. And then the energies which choose to participate and enter that plan will choose to enter and be Homo sapiens, no matter where humans occur in universe, in order to complete and enact this God-given plan. Of course, the choice of how it's done would be tailored along with the intent of the individualized energy. Then I asked Bucky, what is the hope for us on this planet? He answers, there is great hope if the species continues. And the species probably will continue, even if the individual members here dwindle down to a very few for a period of time. Those individuals that are left will take up the slack, so to speak, and carry and energize the mental pool of the species. But it's very much a choice at this time, whether or not, in general, the species, well, how it continues. So then I'm asking Bucky about this being his only incarnation. And I said, is that true for many people? And he says, no, some people choose to go in and out of physical many times. And this is much riskier and much more rigorous. But people who do have a great appeal for the sensory aspects of physical existence may choose to go in and out much more often. Other people who are working to not have the allure and the appeal of physical sensations inhibit, hamper, or affect their intent on coming into physical, will work at that before they are born. So some people will incarnate, will take on a body by choice many, many times, and then others will choose to do it only once. There are so many ways we complete our intent. There is no one set way. Everything that is possible is possible. So you cannot say there is one way to experience physical, one truth for everyone, because most everything that is possible has been accomplished or expressed by somebody, somewhere, at least at some point in our universe and in time in our species. So then I asked Bucky, do you still feel like you're an individual now? And he answers, he said, well, now it's if I'm in heaven because I'm living my greatest desire, and that was to be pure mind. Pure mind without the physical encumbrances, the physical necessities. To be pure mind with the energy of God to sustain me. I just swim and wallow and explore in knowledge and information. And that is my heaven now. That's the end of the meditation, but I did just want to add a little personal note. If you go to bfi.org, it's the Bucky Fuller Institute. And I knew that Bucky and his wife died almost simultaneously, but I didn't really know how. And there is a documentation of how that happened at the BuckyFullerInstitute.org. So that's a pretty interesting story too. So thank you for coming to listen to how a real, certified, amazing equivalent of Leonardo da Vinci considered his life here on Earth.